sentence or paragraph or whatever explaining and justifying the inclusion of this line item. All right? So when the adjuster says we don't pay for starter or it's included in waste, what's the homeowner, they've already read this paragraph. All right? So think about this for a second. So waste is brand new building materials that are cut off because of cutting loss, thrown in the dumpster and taken to the dump. Is that what waste is? Can you tell me where installing brand new building components on a building or on a roof fit in that definition? It's nonsense, isn't it? It's not waste, it's being installed on the building. It's not waste, it's being installed on the building. It's nonsense. So you explain that to the consumer, you have them read this stuff, and she goes, no, I want that starter. I want that hip and ridge. I've had contractors not install the starter because the carrier didn't pay for it and they didn't install it. And the homeowner threw a fit. They took off that first couple courses, they put on the starter and put it back on afterwards. After she threw a fit because they wouldn't pay for it. Now that's a homeowner that's really, man. Purpose and function. Starter course shingles are a key component of your new roofing system. The starter strips are unseen, installed below the first course of shingles at the eave and up along the rake edges of your roof. The primary function of starter strip is to prevent blow-off in moderate winds of the first course of shingles at the eave by adhering the course with strong mastic adhesive to the starter itself. This is critical because if the vulnerable starter course of shingles are lifted during wind-driven rain, leaks can cascade into a much larger damage due to water intrusion in your home. The vast majority of property policies pay for building, the vast majority, we're not talking about her policy, the vast majority of policies pay for building materials of like kind and quality. If you have starter course shingles on your roof at the time of the storm, then generally speaking, carriers shall include them to the consumer in their estimates for roof replacement. Note that Xactimate line item description does not include an account for starter course shingles in the shingle install line item. It is clear that in Xactimate's line description pane for this line item that is designed for field shingles only. Per Xactimate, and here's the website address they can click on and verify that that's true. Who's the credible objective third-party source for that line item? Xactimate themselves. Do they believe that that's a credible source? They do. Boom.
Steve, on the starter tip, would you put in there install starter or remove replace starter?
Oh, yeah, because the remove isn't, there is no remove starter course in the line item. You have to create it. So remove starter course, install starter course. Remove hip and ridge, install hip and ridge. It's exactly right, Don.
That would help overcome the issue of tear off being lower than what you actually tear off.
That's right. Good point, Don. Are you also, do you see how Don back there, what's he doing? He's thinking, what else have I been leaving off my estimates, right? I've been leaving off the tear off the starter. I've been including the starter, for whatever linear feet it is around the perimeter of the roof, but I haven't been including the tear off of the starter and the tear off of the hip and ridge. I need to start including that. Do y'all start to get what we're doing here? Do you really care if they leave off the starter and the hip and ridge if you hit your number? That's not the point. The point is horse trading. If you're wanting to hit a $20,000 number, you write a $25,000 estimate, and they offer $20,000, what are you going to say? Yes. Done.
Like legitimizing why you're asking for something, a third party would be the manufacturer also.
Manufacturer is one of the best, most credible objective third party sources.
This is the product I'm using. This is the reason why they say we need to use this product, and that legitimizes my request for it.
If the consumer already has a golden pledge, and they go back with a roof from Chuck that doesn't have a golden pledge, or have they been indemnified? Have they been made whole? No. So what do they have to go back with? Golden pledge. Drip edge. Purpose and function of this line item. Adds waterproofing to a structure, improving the efficiency of water shedding at the edges, adding protection to the underlying wood. Secondly, drip edge guards against the movement between the deck and the fascia boards. Finally, drip edge adds an attractive finishing touch to the asphalt shingle roof. Most policies provide for replacement of items with materials of like kind and quality. The Asphalt Roofing Manufacturers Association Residential Asphalt Roofing Manual includes drip edge in its recommended application procedures. The IRC code, section R905.2.5.8 states a drip edge shall be provided at eaves and gables of shingle roofs. Adjacent pieces of drip edge shall be overlapped a minimum of 2 inches. Drip edge shall extend a minimum of 1/4 inch below the roof sheathing and extend up the roof deck a minimum of 2 inches. Drip edges shall be mechanically fastened to the roof decking at a maximum of 12 inches. Blah, 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 blah. So, are those some pretty good, credible, objective third-party sources that were explaining and justifying the inclusion of this line item? And so Ms. Jones goes, no, I want that. I want that. In fact, Mr. Adjuster, it is illegal for my contractor and I to enter an agreement to leave it off. Is it overstating it that it's illegal? No, it's illegal. That's what the building code is, the law. And if you do something in violation of the law, that's called a criminal act. Are you guys criminals? Then you don't do criminal acts. Right? So what you do is, this is your job. They don't dictate what you're going to do on your job. Do you dictate how they do their job? Why don't you?
What's your response when they say, well, the code's not enforcing that area?
Why do you say that?
Pay for code upgrade.
No, I mean, they literally say, tell us all the time, well, code's not enforcing that area. We don't pay for that.
So the insurance commissioner in Oklahoma wrote a bulletin. It is awesome. Even though it's not applicable in the other 49 states, still, is that a credible, objective source? A state insurance commissioner. That's pretty credible, isn't it? And so if you go and Google Oklahoma Insurance Commissioner Bulletin, comma, enforcement of code, man, he lights it up. So I would do a poor job of giving the answer compared to the credible, objective third-party source, which is a state insurance commissioner, who says that just because police aren't pulling people over doesn't mean you can speed.
I got a point on that that'd be handy to people. So there was a guy here in DFW that I was writing estimate for a couple of years ago, and some inspector in Parker made him tear off shingles and put on ice and water, because he said per code you got to have ice and water. And the DFW, well, I guess it does ice dam a tiny bit, like every 8 years. I mean, I have seen ice damming in the DFW. Yeah, made him do that. That happened to him. He said, put it in writing. He got it in writing, and they started calling all the building inspectors all over the DFW. This guy made me do blah, blah, blah over here in Parker. Are you going to do that too? Oh yeah, we do in fact enforce the code. Can you put that in an email for me? Most of them don't. But he started asking for ice and water on everything going forward. Okay, is it enforced? Well, he said it wasn't. So I just wanted to give that example. He pushes for ice and water all over the DFW. If you want that, let me know. So.
If the price warrants the extra effort and work to go after it, then all the consumer has to do is write a letter to the city attorney or out in the county to the county judge and ask this question. Do law enforcement officers in your jurisdiction have the authority to selectively enforce the law? And anybody here ever been a police officer besides me? I was one in my 20s. Do law enforcement officers have the authority to selectively enforce laws? No, they do not. Where would they obtain such authority? They don't have the authority to do that. These code enforcement officers don't have the authority to selectively enforce the code. They don't have the authority to do such a thing. So you get that in writing from the county judge or the city attorney, and guess what? They're going to enforce it now, aren't they? Because the city attorney says that they do. Get that letter.
Several steps that we've taken, we've actually visited with the code enforcement officials and had a draft letter. And I live in Utah, so we wrote it for the whole entire state, the whole jurisdictions for the whole state. And it reads something like this. In the state of Utah, we require that you follow the building codes that list all of 2015, IRC, UBC, and all your other energy codes. But he gives examples. He said if you're going to tear off the roof, you need to include ice and water shield. If you're going to replace an electrical outlet, it may be a GSCI, full circuit converter. If you build stairs, they have to conform to comply with this. And what he added on was really important. He said, whether you pull a building permit or not, whether you're a contractor or a homeowner, doesn't matter. You still have to comply with these codes, and it's enforceable in the court of law. So we take that form and we add it to our supplements. And if they don't, if we get pushback from the adjuster, we go to the State Board of Insurance, and they've got a website there to make a grievance. Open up a file in case for our homeowner and submit it. And the insurance company has 10 days to respond. And if they don't comply with the code, then they get fined. And if they continue to do that, they'll kick them out of the state. So that's what we have.
Ooh, that's nice. Is that a credible, objective, third-party source?
That's correct.
Yeah, it's the state. It's the government that says so.
So what if it's in their policy that they don't cover code upgrades? Then you're just screwed out of it?
You mean, what if there's no additional law and ordinance coverage?
I guess I had two last week.
Okay, so there are some policies that don't include law. In commercial, you have to buy a separate policy, don't you, for law and ordinance, right? It may be included in the BOPs, but not your typical CPP policies. So if the policy says that they're going to replace it with materials of like, kind, and quality, and it does say that, right? So like quality, so when it was built, was it built to code? Yes. So like quality would include what? Going back to code. And that same bulletin I told you, the Oklahoma State Insurance Commissioner, he addresses that also and says it's illegal in the state of Oklahoma for you to sell duplicate insurance because the like, kind, and quality already covers law and ordinance, so you cannot charge extra for law and ordinance coverage because they already paid for it, built into the like, kind, and quality. Boom! Now they got an insurance commissioner in Oklahoma. Same bulletin. Is that a credible, objective, third-party source? They're going to say that's not applicable in Texas. I'm not saying it's applicable in Texas. I'm saying that it's a legitimate argument about this. What we need to do is get some lawsuits where you got some policyholders suing the insurance company for making them have to pay extra for duplicate insurance for law and ordinance.
I may have heard this from you as well. When you talk about code issues, instead of saying code upgrades, you just say code compliance.
Compliance. Don't use the U word.
Then you're just complying. You're not upgrading.
Think about it. From the adjuster standpoint, when you say upgrade, what are they thinking? Betterment. You're making them better off, right? Not indemnification, but betterment. Is that what you're doing? No, you're complying with the code. So don't use the U word, use code compliance. Don't use the M word, mold, use water damage. Don't use the M word, matching. Use what?
Like, kind, of quality.
No, not matching. What's in the NAIC, the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, Unfair Claim Settlement Practices Act? A reasonably uniform appearance. So use that phrase, reasonably uniform appearance. Don't use matching. If you use matching, they're ready to fight you because they match it, right? Not a matching state. Don't say matching because that's the word that's going to elicit a response from them. Uniform, a reasonably uniform appearance. Right? In other words, we're not going back with a patchwork quilt roof. By the way, if they say we're going to patch this roof and you do an ITEL and the supposed shingle doesn't match, do the repair. Do the repair, get paid for the repair, and then have your consumer, the client, throw a snot flying fit. Because now the roof looks like a patchwork quilt. Is that a reasonably uniform appearance? No, so it's a violation of the law. What law? Anyone know? I just quoted it a second ago. The Unfair Claims Settlement Practices Act. The law, the Unfair Claims Settlement Practices Act, says that every claim shall be handled so that the building has a reasonably uniform appearance. Does it say the word match? No. A reasonably uniform appearance. Is the patchwork quilt roof a reasonably uniform appearance? No. 95% of the time the contractors do this, they end up replacing the roof afterwards. So you get the repair and the replacement of the roof, and you're just doing what the insurance company said to do. Do the repair. So have them come out, mark which shingles to replace them using what ITEL says, and it looks horrible, and the consumer says, I'm not going to accept this. This is not what I bargained for when I bought my policy, and I'm not going to accept it. And guess what? Then you replace the roof. That's in my book. Ern Howard in Ohio come up with that idea. Roof America. Genius.
In commercial roofing, one of the big things of code upgrades is take the insulation of the home.
Oh, that ISO board? Sure. In fact, I've had deals where you have the rubber roof, the EPDM roof on these commercial roofs, and hail hits it. I mean, like, I'm talking about big hail, baseball-sized hail. It didn't, very little damage to the EPDM. The ISO board looks like Swiss cheese. So you take the chalk, you get down on your knees, and you do this chalk on sideways, and here's all these voids. Guess what? You have damage to the ISO board. How are you going to replace the hail-damaged ISO board without replacing the EPDM roof on top of it? Can't be done. So you got to replace the whole thing, don't you? Now, let me tell you a quick story. In Oklahoma City, we had one of those. It's about a $1.2 million roof. It was in appraisal, and the umpire says, let's go out there and take one last look at this. And the owner replaced the roof before we went out there the second time. He destroyed the evidence. We couldn't establish the damage to the ISO board. He lost $1.2 million because he couldn't wait another week. Because he destroyed the evidence. Wow. So, guys, if you have things in appraisal and you want to win, don't destroy the evidence until the award has been signed.
One way to beat the indentions in the ISO is have somebody figure out the engine loss.
Yes.
And calculate that, and they'll pay for it.
Also, inside the definitions section of your property policy, it defines property damage. Anybody here know what the definition is in policies? Anyone have it memorized? I do. Imagine that. Property damage is injury to, destruction of, or loss of use of tangible property. Injury to is what? That's your cosmetic damage, like dents to a gutter. Is it still functional? Of course it is. The gutter has been injured, right? Injury to, destruction of, we know what that is. Loss of use, what's that? That's our functional damage, right? There's a loss of use. For example, if the wind blows hard enough to break the seals on a shingle roof and they don't seal back down, is there a loss of use of the mastic adhesive? Yes. Is that functional damage? By definition, it is. Because the policy says property damage is injury to, destruction of, loss of use. And if you have a loss of use of the mastic adhesive, that's property damage by definition. It's defined in the policy. Is that good stuff?
Yeah, but what do they say? Because I've been with several adjusters that say, oh, when it gets hot again, it'll seal back down.
And you know what? They could be right. So let's let a couple, how many weeks do you think it would take in warm weather for that to happen, Miss Adjuster?
They don't know. They don't know.
Well, how much? I agree with you. How are they going to argue with you if you're agreeing with them? By the way, that works really well with wives. It takes the knees right out. Anyway. And husbands.
But it still doesn't fix the problem.
All right, so let's say that you agree on 2 weeks of 60-degree weather. So once you've had 2 weeks of 60-degree weather, then you go back out and take a look at it and see if it's resealed. Because they could be right. Sometimes it will reseal. So let's go back after 2 weeks of I've done this in appraisal, so then fine. It's March, so probably by mid-April we'll have had a couple weeks of 60-degree weather, and it should reseal, right? So we'll revisit out there and take a look at it, and if it has, then awesome.
But what if this is July and it's still flopping around?
Then a couple weeks of July weather, it should reseal, and if it hasn't, then guess what? It's not gonna. And if they don't, Have the manufacturer's rep put something in writing that it should reseal within a certain period of time, right? I mean, you guys work with these manufacturer's reps, right? So have them write you a letter in their official letterhead that's take a couple weeks, 60 plus degree weather, and if it's going to reseal, it will. There's your objective third-party source, isn't it? That answer your question? Yeah.